Well, conquering mountains for the greater good, that's the goal of former Public Protector and Social Justice Chair at Stellenbosch University, Professor Thuli Madonsela, and SRC Chairperson Ola Njengele as they prepare to climb Table Mountain next week. Let's find out from them what this initiative is all about. It's got to do with an Action for Inclusion campaign to assist students with financial difficulties. I've just been told that it's just Ola who's joining us for the moment via Zoom from Cape Town. Ola, hello to you. It's a wonderful initiative. Tell me a bit more about Action for Inclusion and why climb up Table Mountain. Good morning.
Hi, I hope that you're all well. So I think student debt has been an issue that has been prevalent in many of our institutions in South Africa. And I think what the previous SRC and the current SRC, along with the Prof, did was kind of like brainstorm as to how can we kind of like remedy this situation and kind of like find a fitting way to address it. And I think there was nothing better than kind of like tackling it with some action, with trying to raise some funds to tackle all of these student debt issues that many South African students face on a daily.
I mean, just how bad a situation are we talking about? Obviously, you're going to try and raise as much money as possible, Ola, but you can't help every student who's struggling with student debt. It's an unfair situation that they find themselves in. Just give me a sense of numbers. Is there a target that you're aiming for?
So at the moment, we're kind of like aiming for 10 million, but we also need to ensure that we cover the 2 million that we sign under surety of around about 30 or just over 30 students. So as you can see, a great amount of money only even covers a small number of students. So we really have our hands full here, which is why we always urge people to kind of like support this initiative as it's for greater good, it's a greater cause, and it really will afford students an opportunity to kind of like further their success at these spaces.
Well, just before I move on, I just want to let our viewers know we are hoping to speak to Professor Thuli Madonsela. She's part of this Action for Inclusion campaign. My team just telling me that, in fact, the Prof is on top of Table Mountain at the moment. We're trying to establish connection with her. That'll be great if we can get the Prof on top of Table Mountain, won't it, Paula? Once we've got her, I don't have her yet, we'll bring her into this. I cannot help but imagine that at the best of times, student debt is crippling. Now, we've been dealing with COVID-19 since March. Many students are actually working to pay for their studies. Now, they would have lost whatever jobs they might have had, whether it was a waiter or weekend jobs. They've lost that little bit of income they had. And I imagine that's made the student funding even more difficult at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also been, some sort of tough thing, for even SRCs in general, trying to negotiate with their institutions on how can we remove some fees and, which ones should we let remain. So it's really been a struggle, but I think at least for us, I can confidently say that we have at least let go of some fees. There were some interventions put in place to kind of like ease the financial burden on students. But however, it's never enough.
And there is always going to be this debate, isn't there, well, that, yes, these are educational institutions, but they're also businesses. They also have costs that they've got to cover. You're paying for highly versed lecturers, obviously the buildings, all the costs that go with it. So how did those negotiations go when you had them? Where are you able to find each other in the middle? Students need an education to go on to get jobs, to make money. At the same time, the universities need to make money to pay for people who deserve to be paid. It's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it?
And I think you're definitely right there when you talk about how it's a business, because it really is a business. So I think we mostly target the areas that won't be as much affected. You can't let someone pay for a residence if they weren't staying in a residence. So you kind of like can cut off that fee. If they're not eating around here, you can cut off that fee. All of those smaller fees can, at the end, when they're all added up together, they amount to a greater amount of money, and they can help out ease the financial burden on many students. So we kind of like nitpick and see which areas won't necessarily affect, the quality and standard of the education that is taught, and won't necessarily affect the institution and many of its people at a greater level.
Well, I'm going to ask you to stay where you are for the moment on your laptop or your cell phone. My team now telling me I do have Professor Thuli Madonsela on the telephone who's joining us. Prof, good morning to you. I hope you can hear me. You're standing on top or near the top of Table Mountain. I hope you can hear me. Tell me about this Action for Inclusion campaign. You're clearly putting in some training.
Thank you for the privilege. Yes, we are being led by young people, students, to raise funds for fellow students who could be excluded from university for student debt. And we've put them on the basis of maturity for now, and we're raising funds to cover that money. There's 54 students involved. We immediately need 2.2 million, but also are raising more money so that next year there's no problem.
And how are people able to get involved? Obviously, Professor, you're busy doing it at the moment. I know you're out on or near Table Mountain. I'm speaking to Ola, who's given me the SRC perspective of this, but many people are going to want to get involved in this Action for Inclusion campaign. How do they do it? When is the actual hike, the climb of Table Mountain taking place?
Table Mountain, we're climbing it next week, Sunday, which is the 22nd. And people, can they please join? We have information on the Stellenbosch website, or they can look for a link called Give and Gain. If you click to Give and Gain, you will get our bank details and contact numbers. 22nd is Table Mountain. 28th is a walkathon at Pinal. And we invite everyone to come, particularly to these two spectacular expeditions. Table Mountain is beautiful. Pinal is a former slave settlement, but where there's been amazing work around collaborative development.
Professor, I asked Ola this question as well. Maybe you can weigh in on this. When it comes to student fees and student funding, how far has the support gone from the universities themselves? I asked him the question that these are still businesses. They need to make money to function. But can universities do more in cutting financial costs for students? What's your opinion?
I would say, speaking for the two universities that I am involved with, Wits and Stellenbosch, the universities are doing their best to raise funds. That's why we only, for example, in our case, have 54 students. Even when we started this process, there were more students than 54. The university colleagues did their best to find funding elsewhere. The difficulty is, of course, if you don't eradicate student debt, universities can face liquidity challenges. The best way is to get endowments that have money that just keeps growing and growing and growing.
Professor, you and I have spoken many, many times, and I know we are talking about the Action for Inclusion campaign. People can go to the Stellenbosch website. You have the climb up Table Mountain and this walkathon, as you're talking about. But, Professor, it would be remiss of me, and I certainly hope you don't mind, if I can ask for your thoughts and reaction on Prophet Shepherd Bushiri escaping South Africa. I'd just like your thoughts on that, because I saw you tweeted something about that. Can you give me your comment on Bushiri escaping South Africa?
I don't think he's setting a bad example for his followers. Firstly, I don't think we should call people prophets. I can't just rock up and suddenly call myself a doctor and then everyone calls me a doctor. I do think that the media should be careful about who we call pastor and who we call prophets, because we legitimize people who never even went to Bible school But that aside, he is behaving wrongly. Everyone is equal under the law. If you're not happy, there are channels to complain. We haven't heard from Mr. Bushiri that he approached the independent investigation directorate of the police or the secretariat to complain about the way he was treated. We haven't heard that he asked his embassy to formally approach the South African government before he ran away. So he runs away, he ignores the laws, and then he dictates to this country on the terms on which he's going to come back. That can't be right, because everyone then is going to treat us like that. You ignore the law, you violate the law, and then you dictate the terms on which you have to be held accountable. It doesn't work that way.
Professor, I'm going to say thank you very much for your opinion on what has happened with Bushiri, Shepherd Bushiri. As you say, we shouldn't be calling him Prophet, so I will call him Shepherd Bushiri for the moment, leaving Malawi. But more on the Action for Inclusion campaign, my thanks to both Professor Thuli Madonsela, Social Justice Chair, and SRC Chairperson, Stellenbosch University, Ola Njengela, joining us. Their climb up Table Mountain taking place next weekend to raise funds and assist students who are unable to complete their studies. It's a wonderful initiative, and all the best to both of you.